Apologies in advance if this video has a super clickbaity title. It's just kind of hard to come up with a concise but accurate title for be careful which gun you use to blast a home intruder because it could have negative implications at trial and sentencing. But sit tight because this is a somewhat shocking video describing exactly that. Many of you know I'm the U.S. Law Shield Independent Program Attorney for Louisiana and Mississippi, which means that if you smoke some goofball in either of those states, I'm probably your lawyer. You don't have self-defense coverage for a lawyer, then do yourself a kindness and at least get the minimum $11 a month coverage for U.S. Law Shield. That'll pay for your legal fees if you're charged criminally or sued civilly from a legal self-defense incident. I'll leave a link below to check it out in the comments or get USCCA. I don't give a shit, but you should have something. I don't recommend companies other than Law Shield or USCCA, but Law Shield, in my opinion, is the better of the two as someone who's also an insurance lawyer as well. That would be my recommendation. Anyways, as part of my work for Law Shield, I give speeches and I hold free lawyer Q&A sessions a couple of times a month. One of the most popular questions I get asked every single time is, doesn't matter at trial what kind of gun I use in a self-defense incident or what accessories I have on that gun. For years, my answer's always been, unless it's something like really bad, like a surprise ejection port cover or a cringy Punisher skull set of grips or something, it really doesn't make a difference if you have a lawyer who can explain the advantage of using an AR-15 instead of a double-barreled shotgun for home defense. Turns out that while I've never personally had a client convicted by a jury, there's substantial research out there about this exact subject, and what it points to is actually a little bit frightening. So did you know that you're more likely to be sentenced to a longer term, all other things being equal, if you use an AR-15 instead of a shotgun or a handgun or even a Mini 14. I've got to mention the Mini 14 because I found this study called Will It Hurt Me in Court when I was researching that most recent Mini 14 video I did a couple of weeks ago. This 2009 paper is by Dr. Glenn Meyer. And here's how it went. Jurors were selected for different mock trials. The facts were the same, except the study would change the gender of the defendants and the firearms that the defendants used in a self-defense incident to see if it made a big difference with the jury verdicts. The main question from the study was, are defendants judged more harshly if they use a more fearsome seeming weapon? In the first scenario, a homeowner hears a crash from his living room. He or she grabs a gun, runs downstairs to investigate, and sees a burglar stealing a VCR. For those of you born after 1996, a VCR was just like Netflix, except you had to get dressed, go to Blockbuster, rent a movie on a cassette tape the size of the New Testament, put it into a machine that would let you watch the video on the tape, basically Netflix. Anyways, VCRs were still expensive in the 90s when this scenario was initially being presented, and the drug of choice back then was way cheaper. So a VCR could get you a crack cocaine cornucopia. Anyways, homeowner sees a burglar, points a gun at him, tells him to stop. Now the burglar's unarmed and the burglar doesn't move and doesn't comply, responds by telling the homeowner, "I'm gonna kill you." So that's when the homeowner shoots the burglar, killing him. Sensible TFB TV viewers and hosts would call the police, make an appointment with Stanley Steamer, and take the kids out for ice cream and Blockbuster to get a VCR tape. However, a lot of people out there have something called moral compass, and these people could be jurors. The scenario was presented to several sets of mock jurors, and the only facts that would change would be the type of gun used and the gender of the homeowner. We're going to skip the gender study for this video, but we'll talk about it in the next video if this one's popular enough and if you guys are curious about that. Let's talk about the guns. The guns that could have been used by the defendant, the homeowner: AR-15, Mini 14, pump shotgun, over-under shotgun, Glock 19, or 38 snub-nose Smitty. Let's talk about that real quick. The AR-15, clearly the sinister rifle here, all black, militaristic in appearance. Most Americans believe that an AR-15 will go full semi-automatic, firing hundreds of deer-killing rounds in a split second. In other words, most Americans know what an AR-15 is, but they don't know what an AR-15 is. Ironically, the Mini-14, also chosen for the study, identical in capability to the AR-15. It just has a traditional wood stock, so it looks like Granddad's hunting rifle a little bit. Pump shotguns, still kind of scary, but most Americans probably think pump shotguns are the most sensible home defense option. That's just me speculating. While the over-under is a terrible choice for home defense, giving you just 2 rounds in an unwieldy package with probably crappy sights, although it's probably the most politically correct gun of the bunch. Finally, you've got a kind of scary Glock 19, and you got your hard-boiled Detective Granddad's .38 Snubby, which surely wouldn't offend most putative jurors. Now get ready for this, because here's the main takeaway. In a straight-up comparison of everything else being the same, the juries convicted the AR-15 wielding homeowner almost 50% more frequently than a homeowner armed with a Mini-14. What I mean is that guilty or not guilty, everything else being the same, the homeowner with an AR-15 had a 50% greater chance of being convicted than the homeowner with the Mini-14. The AR-15 owner was found guilty 65% of the time, while the Mini-14 owner was found guilty less than half the time, just 45%. Remember when I jokingly said this about the Mini-14 6 years ago? The Mini-14 has a lot lower and more conservative profile. It looks more like a hunting rifle when it is, in fact, a tactical semi-automatic rifle in an intermediate cartridge. You have about a 43% less chance, in my personal experience, of your nosy ass neighbors calling the cops on you if they see you taking your Mini-14 out to your truck versus your big, scary AR-15. Back then, I was just kidding. But it turns out I was almost spot the on with that joke. But wait, there's more, and it gets worse. On average, if the Mini-14 owner was convicted, he would be sentenced to about 2.5 years in prison by the mock jury. The AR-15 owner, 7 to 9 years in prison. So not only is it the case that someone who defends themselves with an AR-15, they're going to be more likely to get convicted than a Mini-14 owner, but they're going to go to jail for 3 to 4 times longer than the Mini-14 owner, all other things being equal. Guys, I am dead serious thinking about swapping out my AR-15 in my bedroom with a Mini-14. That's crazy. Basically the same capabilities of the AR-15. I'm just as good a shot with my Mini-14 as an AR-15. So maybe I'll take a half-second longer reload time over 6 additional years in the clink. I don't know about you guys. I'm too pretty for prison. I don't want to end up being Joe Exotic's bitch. This is insane. I was in absolute shock when I read these results. And it seems like they're legitimate because this study has been cited and restudied over the years. In fact, I would think that the AR-15 animus is even more intense nowadays than it was back then, so it could be worse. Okay, so what about handguns and shotguns? For whatever reason, even though handguns and shotguns were included in the study, only pistols were mentioned in the actual analysis, the report, right, of the study. And that was only the handgun's impact on the length of sentence, not how often or how much more frequently a handgun user was to be convicted versus, somebody who used something else. The written report simply says that, unsurprisingly, a homeowner with a handgun, if convicted, was sentenced for an average of 2 to 4 years, kinda on par with the Mini-14, right? This also reinforces the maybe just get a Mini theory, because no doubt a Mini-14 is going to be more effective and easier to shoot accurately than a handgun, but if you're gonna serve the same or shorter sentence in the less likely scenario that you're actually convicted, you may as well just get a Mini-14. There was no mention of the shotguns at all for some reason. Maybe it's out there in the raw data, but it wasn't in the report. Anyways, here's the conclusion quoted directly from the report. In short, shooters using an AR-15 may violate the perceived norms of someone in a defensive mode. Mock jurors may not see an AR-15 as a normal defensive weapon for the typical homeowner. Homeowners may want to consider the interaction of weapons' appearance and legal risk. This is not to say that effective weapons should not be used, but one would be foolish not to have knowledge of potential problems. A defense attorney should be cognizant of these weapons' effects. The defense attorney may then use appropriate arguments and experts to defuse them. Here's another surprising point. Just the appearance of the AR-15 led to these verdicts, nothing else. In other words, there was no argument, no prosecutor saying this is an AR-15, a weapon of death made for just killing, it's more dangerous, it's more deadly, and it's used by serial killers. Jurors simply found the defendant with the AR-15 guilty more often and hit him with a longer sentence just by looking at the gun. That's it. No other evidence than the way it looked in court. Pretty amazing. Let's pursue this to the logical conclusion here. Clearly, you're much more likely to be convicted and serve a longer sentence if you use an AR-15. That's assuming the results of this report are correct. But the real question is, how much capability are you willing to sacrifice in exchange for a reduced risk of serving a longer prison sentence? After all, if you use a Nerf crotch bat, you won't serve any time. And not just because you will probably be dead, but clearly there's a choice that you can make between, say, a Mini 14 and an AR-15 that might have no practical implications for self-defense, only legal consequences. And as I've said for years, you can get about the same capability from a Mini 14 as an AR-15. They're effective. Okay, well, say that you turn this video off and you say, I'm going to get a Mini 14, that's it. But what happens if you get this? The Mini 14 Tactical. First of all, the Mini 14 Tactical looks like a cheaper than dirt catalog, a sportsman's guide. And second, you get no real performance advantage while making the rifle scary looking. I think that's a terrible idea. Let's get us a good old-fashioned Woodstock Mini like Granddad used to have. What about an optic, an LPVO, right? That's probably okay. It still looks like a hunting rifle as opposed to, say, like a modern red dot sight. Let's get a sling. Sure, get it in leather or Realtree. Probably a great idea, honestly. And I don't think a 30-round magazine would be a problem, but maybe a 20-round magazine would be better, so you're going to give up some capacity there. Two very nice things to have in a home defense gun, a light and a suppressor. But at that point, I think you've kind of jumped the shark and you may as well just get an AR-15 with all that shit on it instead of adding it to a Mini. Ironically, a light would probably help you see a subject better, and a suppressor would protect everyone's hearing, but you know as well as I do that unless you've got a lawyer who kind of knows his way around a gun and can explain that to a jury, you could get just as stuck with a tricked out Mini 14 as you would with a stock AR-15. And for the same reason, I think the same logic here applies to getting an M1A instead of an AR-10 or an AR-15 or an FAL or a G3 or any other .308 battle rifle. I agree with the conclusion here. No one's saying that you shouldn't use an AR-15 for home defense. I do, and I probably still will, honestly. But you should be aware of the negative potential consequences, legally speaking, at trial if you do. Maybe getting a free U.S. Law Shield lawyer sounds better now instead of a public defender, or spending 200 grand on a lawyer who doesn't know Geisley from Jizzle. Really interesting study, guys. If you liked this video, then maybe I will go back and do an analysis of the gender breakdown, because that was just as interesting in terms of the gender of the jurors and the gender of the homeowner in that study. I've got the study linked below if you want to check it out. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Assume this is true. If it were true, if these results were right, would you consider getting a Mini 14 instead of an AR-15, or using a handgun or a revolver or a shotgun versus an AR-15 for home defense? Tell me what you think in the comments, guys. Stay tuned. See you in a few.